Thanks so much for joining us. We'll just do a bit of introductions from us, and then it's going to be a really relaxed Q&A session. So we've got a list of questions that we will go through, but if there's anything you want to ask, then please feel free to pop it in the chat and we will hopefully cover it. I'm Chloe Hall. I'm a dietitian. I run my own business, the Calm Gut Dietitian. But I spent over 10 years working in the NHS as a gut health dietitian, but I now specialise in histamine intolerance and mast cell activation syndrome. So my husband has MCAS, has done for many, many years, and he's identified histamine as one of his triggers. So he's been following the low histamine diet for almost 10 years. So I'm kind of coming it from a professional angle, but also from we cook like this at home quite a lot. Claire, do you mind introducing yourself?
So I'm Claire. I was diagnosed with MCAS about 10 years ago, roughly, after suddenly having an onset of symptoms. I also have POTS and EDS, which often go together with MCAS. And yeah, kind of somehow ended up with a website that has low histamine recipes on it, just through getting bored with cooking, really, to begin with, being quite overwhelmed, not quite sure what was okay, what wasn't. 10 years ago, there were even fewer resources out there than there are now. So I had the classic situation of being handed a really badly smudged, photocopied list of don't eat these things. And looking at it, and I was with my mum, and we went to a coffee shop afterwards, and just looking at it and going, well, what do I eat? How do I make a salad? How do I enjoy cooking? Because I've always been quite a foodie. And so through a lot of trial and error, sort of figured it out along the way. Had a lot of support from dietitians along the way, which is really helpful. And then randomly one day someone said to me, "Oh, you should post a recipe on Instagram." And I thought, why? That's why no one would be interested in that. And yeah, long story short, it's ended up in a food blog and Instagram and other social media. So I've had lots of chats with, I'm guessing, some of the people that are in this recording as well. And yeah, that's it really.
And Claire, what's your Instagram handle for anyone watching this that wants to
The
find
food one is Low Histamine Kitchen,
you? Brilliant,
which
thank
is, I
you.
know, confusing because my blog is one name and my Instagram is a different name. The blog is Through the Fibrofog. So that was a really old name that had a lot of chronic illness content on it. And then I sort of repurposed it to more of a food blog. And yeah, the Instagram handle made more sense for people to find it that way.
Brilliant, that's really helpful, thank you. Because yeah, 10 years ago there was nothing, was there? I remember just basically feeding my husband chicken and vegetables for a week.
And
And
potatoes. I ate a lot of
yeah,
potatoes.
a lot of potatoes. So what are some of the most common misconceptions you encounter with the low histamine diet?
There's just so many. And some of them I would say are real misconceptions, and some of them are kind of misconceptions that may apply to some people but may not. Because I think one misconception is that it looks exactly the same for everybody, that the low histamine diet is like this easy list of foods that are a yes and list of foods that are a no, and that is going to work for everyone, which I think we can all agree is just not the case. I personally have a few intolerances to things that most people would think were perfectly fine, and I just can't eat them. So some people are told very different things by very different health professionals or people who are working in the health space. Um, so you have to be gluten free, for example. Personally, I'm not. Some people obviously have to be if they're celiac or it's just a real intolerance for them, that you have to be dairy free. Again, some people maybe yes, some people maybe no. Things like aged cheese is probably a no, but things like fresh cheese, a lot of people are completely fine with, and it's an important part of their diet. So that thing, the individuality is a misconception, I think, that you can't reintroduce foods, that you're just stuck on this forever. Yeah, there's probably foods that you can't reintroduce that just don't work for you. But you might find that as you're lowering your histamine bucket around other things like environmental triggers, or you can tolerate medications, you find something that really works for you, that maybe you can add some foods in. Do it slowly, I would suggest. I think Chloe would agree with me on that one. Um, so it's not like a one and done. It's not like this is the diet and you're on it forever. And the other thing is just that it's really boring and that you have to eat really bland food all the time. And I think that as you can experiment more, that you can find ways to make it more interesting and you can still enjoy having a picnic or, you know, possibly going out to eat, depending on your kind of stage and your situation. But that you don't have to always miss out on things, that you can adapt to be included. And, I serve stuff to my family that they have no idea that it's a special diet food.
No, like we've done chili con carnes and spaghetti bologneses with pepper sauces, and no one's had a clue, or
Yeah.
if they have, they've been polite enough not to say anything. So, and I think things like that, like actually, although it's much more difficult sometimes to go to friends' houses, actually, there might be more scope to, like, we do a lot of hosting instead, so then we have control over the food. Um, but absolutely, there's such variability, especially with MCAS, as to what other food intolerances there might be. Like, if I was starting someone out on a low histamine diet, I wouldn't start with gluten free if you don't need to. Um, and again, I wouldn't start with dairy free unless you absolutely have to. Um, and there's some foods that my husband's been able to reintroduce absolutely fine at certain times, depending on, like you say, pollen
Yeah.
or stress levels. But there's some foods, no matter what the season, no matter what the stress levels, he can't touch.
Mm.
Um, and it's really scary, I think, to find that out sometimes, and something a lot of people struggle with. But once you find out what you can cope with, it's really, really helpful to be able to have that flexibility and not be on this rigid list forever and ever.
I
Um,
think the pollen count is interesting as well because I just saw my MCAS doctor, who's a consultant allergist and immunologist, and she said to me that she would never advise me to make changes during spring because that's when the pollen like personally pollen really affects me. Some people it wouldn't, but for me it does. So we never change medications during the spring, and I don't make changes to my diet. And unless it's necessary, I wouldn't take a new medication for another condition if I'm really suffering with hay fever and the high pollen count. So that is something to maybe consider if you are starting to reintroduce foods that may not be the season to do it.
it's such a tricky time at the moment, and I'm working with a lot of people, and we're having to actually pause the reintroductions if they've got a pollen allergy because they're just not managing to get anything back in because they're reacting so much every day to the pollen. So it is a really tricky time, and sometimes
Mm.
restarting in September is a better way to get foods back in. Um, how do you balance reducing histamine exposure with ensuring nutritional adequacy and enjoyment of food? So, do you have any tips up your sleeve, Claire?
Well, I think I'll bounce it back to you on the nutritional deficiency aspect of it. Um, Gosh. So my big thing, and this is what worked for me and took the kind of fear a bit out of it for me, was rather than focusing on my list of can't do, like I can't eat this, I sat at my kitchen table and I wrote a list of the foods that I really liked and that worked for me, that I already knew I tolerated well, that I wasn't getting reactions from. Now, I will say that this was after probably 3 or 4 months of starting medication. So my histamine bucket was being lowered first by medication. Some people don't take medication. Personally, it's necessary for me. And that list just felt positive, right? It took away the like I can't do this, I can't have that, and feeling quite resentful. And it flipped it around and went, oh, well, I really like this. Let me see what I can do with it. So if you take, what's a good example? Cottage cheese, right? Might not work for everyone, but if it does, it's such a versatile food. You can have it sweet, you can have it savory, you can literally spoon it into a bowl, put some fruit on it, some seeds on it, breakfast, you're done, or a snack. Or you can make a smoothie out of it. You can make a salad out of it. You can stuff chicken with it. It's such a versatile food. So I went to the food first and then like worked around it and worked out what I could do with it. And that just felt more positive to me. I mean, that doesn't respond to the nutritional deficiency aspect of it, um, because obviously you want to make sure that you are getting enough protein and carbs and, vitamins, etc. But I think trying to go from a positive, what can I do, is much more helpful mindset wise than everything feels like, oh, I can't do this, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I think the list thing is a really good idea and it can help with making sure you get everything you need. So make a list of the protein sources that you can tolerate. So whether that's chicken, whether that's beans and pulses, um, whatever you can have. Your carbohydrates that you can tolerate, so rice, wheat products, and then your fruit and vegetables. If you're missing anything, or if you can't tolerate dairy products and you think you're missing out on calcium, that is, when you want to think about speaking to your GP about whether they can refer to a dietitian that can help make sure that you are able to get those nutrients. Um, and again, if you're losing weight rapidly or you're underweight, you'd need support to try and make sure that your diet is as nutritionally adequate as you can get it. Um, from an enjoyment point of view, we also made a list of what we normally eat. So before we even thought about histamines, like what was our normal meals, and then how can we adapt them?
Mhm.
So we don't really eat anything fancy during the week because we've got a child and we both work and it's hectic. So we would just eat like all our quick things that we did before, but just adapt them. So like a stir fry, we wouldn't now chuck loads of soy sauce on. We would maybe spice it with things like five spice, or garlic or other things that my husband can tolerate. And the herbs and spices that you will tolerate might be slightly different because of MCAS than what he can. But it's working around what you've got and trying to get back to normal because I guess that's what most of us want is to try and eat as closely to how we did before um, this developed. So yeah, adapting stuff that you already did before. What are your go-to meals or ingredients when creating a low histamine friendly dish that's still exciting and flavorful?
So for me personally, I'm such a soup person. Like if it's remotely cold, then I want a bowl of soup. Which I think rolls into the next question as well, which is like what's easy or what's not overwhelming. Like making soup is so simple. It's one pan usually. You can throw in most things that you've got in your fridge in terms of veg. You can add chicken if you want to, or you can have some fresh cheese or something on the side. So winter, and it's like comfort food, isn't it? Like when you're having a bad day, if you're high symptom, you're tired, you're in pain, you're miserable, you just want something quick. You don't, or not even quick, or just like meal prepping is the quick bit, right? It doesn't matter if it sits on the stovetop for half an hour, but you just want something that you can just do quickly. So yeah, as you say, a fancy meal during the week isn't something that I regularly do because you just don't have time. And my energy goes into work and what I'm doing during the day. So meals are quicker in the evening. Things like baked potatoes, that's really simple. You can just throw them in the oven or in air fryer even. Um, Summer, most of us probably want something a bit lighter, I would say. So you can do like grilled chicken or baked chicken, some salad, and then a grain like rice or quinoa or something like that. Um, and my thing is, if I want to add flavor, then pesto is great because you can make it up in all different ways with whatever herbs work for you. You can use nuts if they work for you, or you can use pumpkin seeds as a nut free. Obviously, leave the cheese out, whiz it up in a blender. And my top tip would be to make a really big batch and then get little containers and just freeze it because then it's just another meal for another meal that you can do on a difficult day, and it's so versatile. You can stir it into soups, you can put it on chicken, you can, I mean, it's endless the things that you can do with pesto, isn't it?
Yeah, I think that's what I missed, like being able to pick up a jar of pesto when my husband first went on the low histamine diet.
Yeah.
So doing that homemade stuff and freezing it has been really
Mm,
helpful. And
mhm.
pepper sauce has changed our life. Like we basically get those red pointed peppers, shove them in the oven for 20 minutes, blend it up, but then we will bulk make it, put it in the freezer,
Mhm.
and then we can make homemade baked beans. So we just get a can of mixed beans and put that on there and do it with a jacket potato, and that's just really easy.
Yeah.
Um, and I've mentioned beans quite a lot, so I know certain lists online say that beans and pulses aren't low histamines, whereas when we've looked at the recent research, it does suggest that um, beans and pulses are low histamine. The only one to be slightly careful of is lentils, but again, you can try it as one of your reintroductions and see how you tolerate it.
Mhm.
But I know we've discussed this there online because I don't think beans and pulses is something you can tolerate, is it?
No, I had to do the low FODMAP diet about, oh gosh, maybe 15 years ago. And the beans and lentils was just the one that I couldn't get back to, unfortunately, which is so annoying because they're so versatile, high protein, good for you. But yeah, no, it's not for me, I'm afraid.
Someone has asked a question about, is there a pasta sauce that doesn't contain tomato, garlic, or citric acid in any of the main supermarkets or anywhere else? Um,
Not that
I
I've seen.
found one. No, no, I spent hours looking. I don't think it exists.
I
Um,
did once see a pesto, and I couldn't tell you where it was, but if you can have time to Google it, I did once see a pesto that was roasted red peppers, pine nuts, so that would depend on whether they work for you, and it was like olive oil and basil. I wish I knew where it was, but I don't recall where it was. I think it was in some little like independent little health food shop, that kind of thing, rather than a big supermarket. But in terms of a pepper sauce, no, I've never been able to find one.
no, the only pasta sauce that I have found a few times is a mushroom one, but a few of them have wine in, so be very careful about what you're looking for. But there has been one that I have found before, but I can't remember what supermarket it was in. Um,
I would say that tend to find Sainsbury's and Waitrose slightly better in terms of ranges because they have more of a free from section than some others. So it's having a work, and also like the bigger stores rather than, not a little local one. Look in the bigger stores.
um, Again, I might as well continue with these questions because they're all related to sources. So while we're on the topic, um, we've talked about quick red pepper sauces. Are any grilled peppers in jars suitable for the low histamine diets? So a lot of them are in vinegars. We were really surprised when we look at the recent research with the British Dietetic Association. Actually, the vinegars were low histamine. However, working with patients, I would say that I do have patients that don't tolerate it. So again, it would be one of these things that you'd have to try a tiny amount and see how you get on with it.
Mhm.
Um, Beyond homemade stock or herbs in oil, any ideas of things that could be frozen, cubes, etc., to lift meals? You've talked about your pesto,
Yeah, so did you she said she'd already tried herbs.
herbs in
So you
oil.
could do I don't know if you can buy it, but you could do it yourself. Grated ginger you can freeze. That would just a teaspoon of that would add a lot of flavor to a soup or a stew or something like that, or a stir fry.
Yeah,
What else? Things to freeze. Yeah, I'm a bit stumped on that one.
yeah, we mainly do a lot of herbs in oil. Um, I've also asked, other than ginger, turmeric, and sweet paprika, are there any low histamine spices? Actually, when we've looked at the research, they are all low histamine, but I know that from an MCAS point of view, people do react to individual ones in some circumstances. So again, with spices, because often we throw everything into one dish, like all different spices,
Mm.
it's sometimes then really hard to work out what you've reacted to. So if you're good, if you cut out spices and you want to reintroduce, try one spice at a time. Then you're more likely to find something you tolerate rather than doing like a mixed curry powder is your first attempt.
I find cardamom is quite a popular one from conversations that I've had with people that seems to be quite well tolerated. Obviously, it's quite good for making things like cookies and like more sweet desserts and things like that.
Yeah, and some of the milder ones like cumin and paprika, I would say, are sometimes a bit better tolerated than sort of hot spices. Um, any dip or spread ideas without meat, fish, or seafood, especially alternatives to hummus without tahini, garlic, or beans due to reactions?
Whipped ricotta or whipped mascarpone if you can do cheese. Uh, did it say without tahini? Without tahini.
Yeah.
Uh, hmm. I know, well, you could roast some vegetables, I guess, and then blend it up with a little bit of oil, some herbs. That might work.
And you've got a few dip ideas on your website, I think, because I think I've
Yeah,
gone to the.
there's some do have tahini in it, so that might not be possible for this person. But if you can do cheese, that's a really simple one and it takes minutes to do. You can throw in some herbs to have it as more savory, or you can throw in some like cardamom or a bit of maple syrup, and that will make it like a sweet, like a fruit dip. That's quite nice if you're entertaining as well. Like if you're having a barbecue or something in the summer, so quick and easy to do, and everyone loves doing that. Even the kids will eat that. Gets them to eat their fruit as well.
Um, Someone's just asked if there's a difference between the histamine levels in canned beans and lentils and cooking them fresh from dry in a pressure cooker. Um, as far as I'm aware, there's no studies that compare the histamine in like canned beans and pulses to dried ones. However, when you can stuff, it's protected from bacteria, and bacterial breakdown is kind of what produces histamine. So I assume that they canned beans and beans and pulses are thought to be low histamine. I definitely have people that can tolerate them. Again, just try a small amount and see how you are. Um, they're really convenient if you manage to get them in as well, just using the
Mm.
canned ones.
Actually, you could probably make dips or spreads out of beans. I'm sure I've seen recipes for them. You just blend them up with some oil and some herbs. That'd be a good to have on rice cakes or something as a snack.
Yeah. Um, great. There's lots of questions in there.
Lots of bean questions.
Lots of easy questions. Um, are dried chives low histamine? Yes. Great. Okay. We can mop them up afterwards because I think there's some that we will probably answer anyway. Um, what are some challenges you faced when adapting recipes for low histamine?
I would say the individuality of it, particularly around, I find there's a certain set of foods that seem very either people find them really helpful, tolerate them well. It's like a real kind of key ingredient in their diet. Or on the other hand, there's the group of people that like, I can't touch that. It will bring me out in symptoms. So things like mango always seems quite divisive. Eggs, some people who even are on quite a restricted diet have eggs as one of their like safe foods. Other people can't have any at all. Personally, I can have one egg at a time, maybe 3 times a week, but if I try and do 2 eggs at a time, no, it doesn't work. So I think the individuality of it and knowing sometimes as well, it's not necessarily that you can't eat that food, but the quantity of it. I think from my experience anyway, from conversations that I've had, it's oh, I can have a little bit rather than it being like a full, you know, say having 2 eggs rather than one. The other thing, yeah, I mean, it always comes back to adding flavor. That's always a tricky one. I try to rely on things like herbs because they are easy to find. You can grow them yourself even. Spices, as we've already mentioned, things like making your own pesto, um, or any sauces that you can freeze, then you've just got it there for another day. But I mean, my blog comments are kind of funny because I will have on the same post somebody going, "Oh, there should be more vinegar, there should be more apple cider vinegar in this. It needs more of a tang." And then I'll have another comment going, "Oh, I can't have vinegar at all." And I'm like, "Guys, I'm just in the middle here." So I would say with any low histamine recipe, whether it's one of mine or whether it's on another site, do look at the ingredients and you do have to see, is this going to work for me? Because not all of my recipes are going to work for everyone. They're just not. we also have many people who have other health conditions. So you could be lactose intolerant, celiac. Like some people have to be on a high salt diet, some people have to be on a low salt hot diet. You know, it is quite individual. Unfortunately, with MCAS, there does seem, from my conversations with people, that a lot of people have another condition as well, or sometimes multiple other conditions. So, and obviously, in just individual food intolerances. So that's always the tricky thing. I try and kind of go the middle road and try and keep as many people happy as I can, but it's not going to please everyone all of the time, unfortunately.
Great, thank you. Um, so I'm just going to answer this one question because it's a really good question in terms of when we're just talking about histamine intolerance, and we kind of just dived in there, assuming that everyone knows what we're talking about when we talk about the low histamine diet and histamine intolerance. And a lot of you may do, which is why you've joined us. Um, but someone's asked, when you're talking about a low histamine foods, are we talking about histamine contained within the food or that the food triggers a histamine reaction? So that's a really good question. Um, so obviously we're talking to people that probably have MCAS. So you may be following a low histamine diet because histamine containing food triggers your symptoms. Um, in this webinar today, we are talking about foods that contain histamine. In some of the other webinars that we do from our selection, me and another dietitian might talk about those food that triggers your own histamine release from your body. But in this webinar, we're talking about the foods that contain histamine. Um, and that's what's really hard about MCAS. There are probably loads of other foods that trigger your own histamine release, but this is talking about high histamine foods. Um, there is a lot of talk online about histamine releasing food. We don't actually know that foods have the ability to do that in our bodies. The studies that we have are test tubes, and our bodies just don't work like test tubes. Um, so we do know that there are other chemicals in foods that are structurally quite similar to histamine. So they go into the same enzyme for breakdown in our body. So foods that contain these other amines can still top up our bucket. So chocolate is one of those foods that actually doesn't have as much histamine as we think it does, but it has these other amines that have the ability to top up our bucket. So I have a lot of patients that react badly to chocolate. And things like lentils, for example, will have these other amines, but less histamine. So those are the sorts of foods that we're talking about. So either high histamine foods or foods that contain those other chemicals that are quite similar. And histamine in itself is not a problem for most people. Like it's a chemical messenger in our body. We all need it. We need it for like our stomach acid release. We need it for the way our body works, our response to infection. But what is a problem is when our histamine levels become far too um, far too high, and then we get all these horrible, horrible symptoms, which can affect our whole body. Um, so that is a really whistle-stop tour of what we're talking about. So sorry we didn't start with that and jump straight in. Um, to tie in, someone's asked, as you were talking about low histamine within the food, what is the threshold for that, i.e., how many milligrams per gram or whatever it is measured in? So there's no university accepted cutoff, and that's why it's so hard and why every single list is different. So when we worked on the British Dietetic Association sheet, we had to pick a cutoff. For other amines, but we also had to pick a cutoff for histamine. Off the top of my head, I can't remember what cutoff we used in the end, but it wasn't a clear-cut thing. It's a bit of a grey area. And as we talked, everyone's individual anyway. Like we don't know what's your cutoff? What's your body's cutoff for how much histamine it accepts? Um, I'm unable to share the BDA low histamine foods list at the moment, so it's only available to dietitians. You will be able to be given it by your dietitian, but at the moment it's not publicly released. Um, so yeah, just on a bit of a divergent. So you've already touched on this, Claire. How do you keep meals interesting when avoiding these high histamine staples like aged cheeses and fermented products?
I'd say two things. One is herbs, spices, foods that have a strong flavor. So, for example, fennel, like I didn't really used to eat it that much before I had to switch to a low histamine diet, but since I have, because it's got a punchy taste, just adding those flavors in, and obviously the things that you personally like. It is tricky, not being able to have aged cheese and things like, I don't know, kimchi or something like that. That, they are the punchy flavors. Soy sauce, I used to love soy sauce. Some people I know, I haven't tried it myself yet. Some people use coconut aminos as a substitute. I haven't tried it. That might be quite individual. But yeah, herbs and spices. And then the other thing I would say is color. And this was kind of highlighted to me by a reader a couple of weeks ago. And I published a recipe that was had a lot of colourful vegetables in it. And it just kind of looks pretty on your plate, right? And we eat with our eyes as well as our stomachs. So people really went for it because they were like, "Oh, my kids will like this because it's colourful." And someone like messaged me and was like, "Oh, my little girl, I think she was 6 or 7, has been told to reduce her histamine levels a bit by her doctor, but she'll eat this because it's colourful and it looks pretty." And then other people have sent me photos of either my recipe or something that they've made themselves, and they've just made it look really nice. And I think just adding, like, making that little bit of effort, and it can take 30 seconds or a minute. They've just like done a smoothie bowl and they've like put all nice little seeds and fruit on top. So as well as the ingredients itself, you can just like take that little moment to make it look more appealing. I don't know, maybe that's a silly thing, but I think that from conversations I've had, that just makes people be more engaged with cooking, be more engaged with the foods that they enjoy, and just make it feel more like not an event, but like a little bit more special than just like, oh, it's lunchtime. I have to eat lunch. I've got to just eat something to make it something a little bit more special. And we can't do that every day because we're busy or tired, but now and again, it's nice to just feel like you're making a little bit more effort, especially if you're eating with family or friends.
Yeah, I think they're really good ideas. And like, I often talk about Christmas, but like, we try and keep like Christmas interesting by doing, I do like turkey sausage rolls, and yeah, low histamine versions of party food so that my husband can join in. And so planning stuff like that for special occasions can keep it a bit more interesting as well. Because
Mhm.
I'm sure, even if you're not on a low histamine diet, you get stuck in a food rut, don't you? So
Mm.
it's nice just to throw a different recipe in every few weeks,
Yeah.
to keep it interesting if
I
you're
mean,
able to.
we did a barbecue on the weekend, and all of the like salady bits were all low histamine. I made all of them. I don't think anyone would have, like, a stranger wouldn't have come in and gone, "Oh, that's weird diet food." They would have just gone, "Oh, it's salads." It was like a potato salad. It didn't have mayonnaise on it. It had a little bit of oil and herbs instead. A sweet corn salsa, a cucumber and celery salad. No, none of my family made any comment that it was like special food. But it's like nice to be able to share food with other people as well. That's also a way of getting back into cooking and back into enjoying food if you feel as though you've been in a rut of the same old meal over and over again.
And can you share some kitchen hacks or storage tips to keep histamine levels low in prepared food?
I think it's the good old freezer, isn't it? Just
Yeah.
freezing batch cooking. I mean, the obvious ones are things like soups and stews. They're so easy to freeze. You can reheat them very easily. Um, you might need to just add a little bit of water when you're reheating them. But you can also freeze kind of unexpected things. Like, I don't do it myself, but I know a lot of people make smoothies and then freeze them, or they do like little juices and then kind of freeze them in little ice cube trays and have juices like that. Or they'll make like a kind of like a juice, but with ginger and turmeric in it, and then they'll put it in a glass, a safe glass, or a cup or a mug, and then pour boiling water on it, and then you've got kind of like a sort of like a tonic, I guess you'd call it. Some of my energy balls you can freeze. I've got some in the freezer right now. Get them out half an hour before you want them, and they'll just thaw out really quickly. Cookies you can freeze, pesto. I think the freezer is your friend, both in terms of kind of safe cooking, so to speak, but also in terms of like fatigue. If you're having a bad symptom day, the freezer is great to be able to just get something out and not have to actually start chopping vegetables or anything like that.
Yeah, we've had to buy a second freezer to keep in our shed to freeze all the stuff. Um, And I think as well, if you are fatigued and are relying on like online shops to do your meals, and you know that they're going to be delivering, I don't know, chicken on Saturday, but you're not going to be eating it till the Thursday, we often freeze stuff that we're not going to be using the next day, so then we can defrost it when we need it, so that it doesn't have, 4 or 5 days sat in the fridge before we're using it.
Mm.
So yeah, the freezer is our best friend.
I think I know people have said to me that on a bad symptom day, it's the day that you're more likely to, I don't want to use the word cheat, what's the good word? You're more likely to diverge from the diet and pick up the phone or order online something from the takeaway. So that then you feel worse, and then it becomes like a cycle because then you're even more tired, you've got even higher symptoms because you've eaten something that doesn't agree with you. So if you have things in your freezer that you can just kind of grab or and just heat up, or some meals in your back pocket that are super simple, I think it just takes away that temptation a little bit. I mean, none of us want to sit chopping 10 different vegetables when we're really tired, especially if you've got pots as well, which many of us do. Time on feet isn't what you want at the end of the day. So yeah, make the freezer your friend, I think, or buy another one like Chloe has.
Um, I think we should mop up the questions in the chat because there are hundreds and it would be good to get through them in the next 20 minutes. So these ones are for me by the looks of it. So, as meals contain multiple ingredients that may cause reactions, is it best to reintroduce a small amount of a food between meals so it's clear if there's a reaction or not? So, what I would do when reintroducing foods is I would keep your diet as with the foods that you know or think that are safe for you, and then reintroduce one food at a time. So that might be one food a week. That's sometimes all people can manage, if there's that fear of a reaction as well. But yes, absolutely do one at a time. Keep to your base diet whilst doing that. Um, Is it from repeated reactions of the same nature over time? The way to tell if a food is always a trigger rather than it being a trigger due to the day's histamine bucket overflowing? Yes, so I often get people to do a food and symptom diary. So by that I mean down everything they're eating, what their symptoms are, if there are other factors. So if you're sensitive to temperature changes and it's been a really hot day, or your stress levels are high, and all of these other factors that we know can trigger reactions. And then we would look at that. But I think it's very normal to have a reaction to a food and think, well, I'm going to react to this every time, and then not want to put it back in your body. Whereas actually, it might have been all these other factors, and you might tolerate it on another day. So, actually, depending on the nature of your reaction, if it was very severe, you might not want to retry it, but obviously get advice from a health professional whether it's safe for you to retry it. Um, Psychologically, low histamine and also having various other significant physical reactions to food is extremely difficult for those who previously enjoyed diverse world cuisines. Any thoughts of how to come to terms with this restriction for those who need medications to help in severe case but can't access them yet? I'm really sorry you're going through that, and I completely empathise with how psychologically difficult it is. It Especially the beginning of people's journeys is often really, really tough, and my husband really, really struggled with it. um we were the type of people that went to like food festivals and ate out all the time, and basically our worlds revolved around eating. So to have part of that taken away was really, really tough. This person has said that they don't want the resources for talking therapy. I'd say if you are really struggling psychologically, make sure you do talk to a health professional that can guide you to places that can help. But I think from a dealing with it without those, is connect with people that are other people that are in this situation. So talks like this, but Marcel Action runs so many great places to connect with other people who are in exactly the same situation. Um, but also find things you can eat. Like Claire said earlier, make a list of the things you can eat and the things you can enjoy. Um, and also the things that are non-food related that you can enjoy, if that makes sense. So, yeah, but no one's arguing that it's not difficult. It is difficult. Um, sorry if I go silent. I'm scanning through the questions. Um, do you have any suggestions for replacing chilies? I really miss having spice in my food. I use black pepper and picorella, but very hard for Indian or Mexican food to not have spice.
I think it's the ginger, turmeric, sweet paprika,
Yeah,
garlic if you can tolerate it, cardamom. Um, don't think there's really an easy swap for chilies. Yeah, that's a tricky one.
it's hard, isn't it? Um, someone's shared batches of things that they freeze, so like low histamine pizza sauce, um, and your green spaghetti sauce. They're really helpful. So if anyone wants to have a look at them, have a look in the chat. But yeah, we have like a low histamine pizza night, and
Ooh.
my 5-year-old loves it. Um, I am currently reintroducing foods. Is there any reason why I'm still hungry after a decent sized meal, or am I being a grumpy comfort eater? Um, I doubt you're being a grumpy comfort eater. I think there's many reasons why this could happen on the low histamine diet. I think maybe a lack of satisfaction in the food that you're eating can be a reason why this happens, or a lack of protein. So that it could be multiple reasons, but if you think maybe it's protein, have a look at the balance of your meal. How much protein sources are you having? So whether that's tofu, beans and pulses, chicken, red meat, whatever that is. Generally, I would say um, it should be about a third of your plate. So have a look at the balance of your plate if that's happening for you, or is it just the fact that you're not getting the same satisfaction out of your food as you were before?
One other
Um,
thing that potentially on that would, because I experienced this myself, is that if the person is a menstruating female, there's certain times in your cycle that some of us crave carbs more than others. So you can end up with this big carby meal that, as you say, doesn't have much protein in it. So you've got increased appetite anyway from your hormones, and then you just fill yourself up with carbs and you're not having the protein. So maybe just have a little look on if you've got like a cycle tracking app or something like that, just in case it's coinciding with that time. It's just a thought. It might be one reason.
Thanks, Claire. Um, I can't manage carbs, so find recipes really hard. Any ideas?
Oh, I think it would depend on what you mean by carbs. Are you meaning things like rice, potatoes, bread, or because obviously a lot of vegetables have carbs in them in lower quantities, so it would depend on what you mean by carbs. Um, if you're meaning not carbs in terms of things like rice and potatoes, then there are carbs in certain vegetables. So if you can eat those, then maybe have a bit more of that in your diet, I would guess.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's sometimes the type of carbohydrates, and I often find that in patients that have POTS alongside MCAS. So for some people with POTS, they might not manage like really quick releasing carbohydrates. So um, things like white rice, for example, or maybe mashed potato. Whereas sometimes we can find carbohydrates they can tolerate that are more slow release. So things like pasta or new potatoes with the skins on. So um, I think probably if you can't manage any carbs, I would definitely seek professional advice because that's going to take away a lot of fiber, and we know that fiber can help stabilize mast cells. But you also need carbohydrates for energy levels, to prevent constipation. There are so many reasons why we need carbohydrates in our diet. So I think depending on what extreme that is at, then do get advice. Um, are there any ideas for sweet food, biscuits, cakes, sweets? So many, so many. I actually find them easier to do low
Do
histamine than
you?
savory. How about you, Claire?
I've never attempted a low histamine cake, I have to say. There is a brilliant Bertha, her Instagram handle is low.histamine living, and she does all sweet stuff. She's a proper baker, so she does cakes, cookies, pancakes, all kinds of things. She has MCAS herself, quite severely. So worth having a look at her page, I would say. Yeah, go and have a look at her stuff. I've got a few on the site. Um, I've never attempted a cake though.
It was my husband's birthday yesterday, so we're doing a low histamine cheesecake at the weekend with fresh
Nice,
cheeses. So looking
nice.
forward to that. Like flapjacks and
Yeah,
yeah,
that's really
there's so
good.
many
And then
ideas.
energy balls are great because you can also freeze them.
Yeah. Um, and sweets. So I often buy my husband fudge at Christmas instead of chocolate. Um, and yeah, we've got loads of fudge in the house at the moment because it was his birthday. Yeah, there's so many sweet ideas, which, as a dietitian, I probably shouldn't be adding on to this, but I have just been on through the Fibrofrog website and seen there are no recipes of red meat. Is there a reason why it's been omitted?
Pure and simple. I haven't eaten red meat since I was 10 years old, so I don't eat it, I don't cook it. Yeah, it's that's the reason. I don't like it. It's personal preference, so I wouldn't really know what to do with it, to be honest.
So, fresh beef, fresh lamb are low histamine. So, we've used Claire's recipes and just substitute it out if we want
Mhm.
red meat. So, you can absolutely do that. So, thanks for clarifying, Claire. Um, and oh, that's a nice idea. I like adding edible flowers to salads because they make them look so beautiful. There's so much
Yeah,
to be said for making the food look nice, isn't there?
definitely. And also, if you have even like a little window box and you just grow a few of your own herbs, somehow that just, homegrown stuff always tastes better, don't you think? I think so.
Yeah, it makes such a difference. We've got a little herb gun to make
Mhm.
things a bit more interesting. Um, what salad ingredients can you eat generally? So there's loads of low histamine salad stuff that you can use.
Mm.
Um, I think the only main ones that are high histamine, sort of your spinach and your tomatoes, are the ones that jump out of my head. Um,
Yeah, you
but
can
you
get
can use,
lots of different types of lettuces now. I again it's like fennel and radishes as well, which weren't things that I typically like. I'd eat them now and again, but I wouldn't pick them up every week. But they have a lot of flavour, so that you can add those into salads, and then the usual grated carrot, cucumber. Um, I sometimes do grated courgette in a salad. I think there's lots of options for salads.
yeah, and celeriac's a really strong flavour as well. That's a really good one to add to salads. Someone else has just put, for me, the other thing that helps keep me interested is to make sure the food is cooked well. So overcooked rice was a no-no. And overcooked dry chicken is unbearable now too, as it's the only meat I eat. Yeah, I can completely empathise with that. I've
Yeah.
overcooked a few chickens over the last 10 years. Um, we've sort of talked about this. Someone's asked, how do you avoid fatigue or what to eat when bedbound? Do you freeze it in plastic tubs? I think freezing is huge, isn't it?
Yeah.
And if you've got carers or family, then giving them clear instructions as to what you can and what you can't eat. Um, Simple recipes if they're able to do them. And make sure you always have snacks
Yeah.
by your chair or your bed or wherever you are mainly, like safe snacks that you're able to have throughout the day. Um, My daughter is at university and finds that she cannot tolerate food which she has cooked herself. even things which she is normally okay with. The only thing she can manage is food which is bought in from one particular Syrian takeaway, which is really expensive. What advice can you give about cooking herself? We thought perhaps it was the air quality and got filters, but it hasn't helped. Obviously,
Hmm.
it's really difficult to know what's happening in that situation. Does she have POTS that is maybe flaring her MCAS, or it's really hard to give advice in that situation. But I'd want to know about, is she standing to cook that meal? Is the kitchen really hot? Um, is it stressful for her having to cook meals away from home and prepare food? What is she doing before that? Is she rushing around university trying to get everything done? What's happening in that situation? I'd probably break it down from there as to what changes can you make to try and mitigate some of the stuff that's happening at the moment. Can you try sitting down while cooking? Can you try other and hydration as well. So at uni, I find a lot of people don't drink enough. I definitely didn't drink enough water at university. So I think and we know that dehydration can increase the chance of reactions in allergies. So why would it not be the same in MCAS, although we don't have the study? So actually looking at fluid and hydration as well around that situation.
And if she does have pots, there's lots of kind of kitchen gadgets that you can get now to help with cooking. So a perch stool for the kitchen is one thing so that she can cook while sitting down. But there's lots of things like can openers, tin openers that are like easier to do than a regular one. Um, I think if you just Google it, I know I've seen a good blog post on this which had a whole list of different kitchen gadgets that are easier for people with disabilities. So if, for example, you're get pain in your hands, for example, like I have a friend who finds it very difficult, so she has specific knives that are much easier to hold, and can openers and things like that. So obviously we don't know what her daughter's other health issues are, if any, but that's just something to consider.
Thank you. And if we don't react to things that are histamine like chili, does that mean we don't have issues? So chili actually isn't high histamine, but no, everyone is individual. Just because you don't react to that one food doesn't necessarily mean you have issues. And actually, there's no one single way of us assessing whether you have an issue with histamine containing foods, apart from doing a low histamine diet for 2 to 4 weeks and then reintroducing foods one by one. But no, there's going to be foods you're fine with, and then foods you're absolutely not fine with if you have histamine issues. Um, Someone's asked, what are in your energy balls, Claire?
There's quite a few different recipes, excuse me, on the blog. So usually it's a base of a nut or a seed, like a lower histamine one, like pumpkin seeds, oats. Then you need something sticky to hold them together. So something like maple syrup, a nut or seed butter. You can get, if nuts aren't for you, you can get pumpkin seed butter now. I mean, you can make your own, and I did do it once. It's actually very easy to do. Um, Plain pumpkin seeds in your blender, blend them away. It will look like nothing is happening at all for a while, and you'll just think that you're wasting your time. And then all of a sudden, it's like some weird magic happens, and the oils get released out of the seeds, and then it just will turn into a butter. Um, so yeah, you need some sticky stuff to hold everything together, and then I tend to put some oats in it just to make them a bit more filling, and then some nuts and seeds. You can also do things like grated carrot to have like a carrot cake vibe with it. Some people tolerate dates, other people don't, so that would be a bit individual.
Thank you. Um, Another pasta sauce recipe. So just easy pasta sauces. So if you missed it earlier, I talked about roasting red pointed peppers for 20 minutes, blending them up. But I also do one that's like a roasted butternut squash one, so it's slightly sweeter, but I'll put loads of stuff like onions, celery, carrots, but also roasted butternut squash, and it makes sort of a sweeter pasta sauce. Um, Are potatoes fine? Because I've seen online that they can act as a histamine liberator. So no, potatoes are absolutely fine. No evidence for them like liberating histamines. And actually, I do find with my patients that potatoes are generally one of the safer foods for a lot of people. obviously there is always the exception. There's always going to be people that don't tolerate that food, but
Mm.
they
I
are low
think this is a
histamine.
moment to say to be a little bit cautious with the resources that are online because they're not always very accurate. I would look into the qualifications of the person who's, in terms of lists, look into what their background is. Yeah, I've seen some very, very odd things. I had someone tell me that carrots were high histamine the other day. I've never seen that on anything that I would consider reputable.
No, and that's what makes it so hard for everybody here,
Hmm.
is getting the right advice and getting on the right list of foods. But really, what we want to be doing is moving away from lists and actually getting to know what's okay with your body.
Hmm.
Is ideally the place you want to go to. Lists are a great starting point, and I think we have to have them to create recipes. Um, I've got some low histamine. I've got a low histamine recipe book on my website, but I've used the BDA list, so they will look probably quite different to Claire's because Claire uses a different list. And ideally, one day we will have one gold standard list. But it's really hard to do that because actually, even the same food will vary in histamine content depending on how you've stored it, how it's been transported, how it's been processed. So to get that gold histamine, a gold standard low histamine list is very challenging. Um, so thank you so much for joining us, and thanks so much, Claire, for sharing all your lovely tips. Your website really is great, and I share
Thank you.
share loads of recipes with my patients. I'm really helpful. So thank you so much. Thank you to everyone who asked questions, and if you do want any more sessions in the future, then let Mast Action know and send some more questions in, and we can put them on.